Hi, everyone. My name's Mary. I'm one of the co-founders of Loopscale, and today we're excited to introduce sponsored vaults. And sponsored vaults are a new credit primitive for programmable credit markets. They allow institutions, funds, and protocols to deploy targeted custom credit markets to bootstrap growth for protocol adoption or asset adoption. And so to understand a little bit about why sponsored vaults are exciting and important, it's helpful to dive into kind of existing DeFi lending protocols. Pool-based lending is kind of the main mechanism by which most lending protocols today work. And so lenders, for those of you who aren't familiar, lenders supply a subset of whitelisted assets. Borrowers borrow from that pool, and then the risk is priced and rates are priced based on something called a utilization curve. And so this was largely a function of technical constraints on Ethereum. And it kind of comes with a lot of different limitations, including one, because you're pricing rates independent of all these different factors, whether that's collateral, duration, or borrower risk, you're kind of limited by the most risky asset in the pool. As well as the utilization-based rates creates idle capital and deadweight loss that creates an inherent spread between the borrow and supply rate. And ultimately, kind of these all come together for the biggest limitation, which is that they limit the types of credit markets you can support and broadly hold back DeFi ecosystem growth. And so kind of the second iteration we saw with lending has been these curated vaults that supply into isolated markets, which they do solve some of these issues around having more specific and custom risk profiles, but you're still ultimately relying on this base primitive of a pool that is inheriting a lot of the same inefficiencies, as well as fragmenting liquidity across isolated markets. And so with Loopscale, we've taken kind of a fundamentally different approach to lending, mostly powered by kind of what's become possible with Solana over the past few years. We've moved from the base primitive of a pool to the idea of a loan or a bilateral credit agreement, which is something you see more often in traditional finance. And we've replaced the market structure that's defined by an algorithm with a multi-parameter order book. And so lenders place limit orders on the order book and match with borrowers. And so this unlocks a lot of different things, and particularly, and what I'm talking about today, is something that is both new and foundational to DeFi ecosystem growth, which is the ability to create new credit markets at zero marginal cost. And so whether you're launching a $100,000 market or a $100 million market, it's no additional marginal infrastructure cost to those different protocols and teams. And so as DeFi grows over next decade with new asset classes, and we're seeing this already with new primitives and LSTs, we view this as critical for the growth of the space. And so something that is true in TradFi and less so in DeFi is this use of credit as a strategic lever for growth. And so you see it across a variety of industries. And so Affirm is a great example, providing credit to consumers at checkout. And 91% of their customers are repeat customers, and shows the value of credit in driving loyalty and user acquisition. And then a lesser-known example is GM, who has a credit line to fund car purchases or auto financing. And they have over $120 billion of credit extended since launching this product. And it's kind of a dual revenue stream for them, as they're bolstering new car sales as well as profiting off of the credit business. And so protocols in DeFi are stuck in a bit of a catch-22 in that you have to be sufficiently big to be whitelisted for a pool to be in that lending market, but a huge part of growth for assets and protocols is having these credit markets available to begin with. And so what we're introducing with Sponsored Vaults today is these different missing pieces of the infrastructure. And so this tool set for teams to define specific markets, be able to direct capital towards use cases specific to their protocol, as well as attract aligned capital from passive lenders. And so with Sponsored Vaults, now teams can launch credit markets defining borrowers, assets, capital providers, and compose liquidity with, most importantly, localized risk. And so whether it is a smaller credit market or a larger credit market, you're not sharing this kind of broader exposure across a group of lenders. And so to discuss how this works a little bit more broadly, so a sponsor is defining the accepted collateral assets for a vault, defining the borrowers that can borrow from that vault, the terms, the available durations. And so in the example of Orca, which most of you know is a trading platform, their kind of North Star is attracting LPs. And so it's in their best interest to make liquidity positions kind of and providing liquidity the most attractive option in DeFi. And until recently, or until Loopscale, you could not borrow against these LP positions. But now with Orca's vault on Loopscale, they're providing liquidity to be able to leverage liquidity positions. And so now you can leverage market make effectively. And so it makes sense for a protocol team, for example, to deploy capital to this very specific use case because the risk in the context of the return for that specific protocol makes sense, but for some more conservative lenders, it might not make sense. And so this is the advantage you have in being able to isolate these markets on a per asset, per lender basis. Another example is the vault we're doing with Global Dollar Network and Paxos, in which the goal is to bootstrap stablecoin adoption. And there's all sorts of different DeFi products that a team like that would want to introduce to the space, whether that's USDG-backed loops or leveraged USDG LP positions. And so to be able to bootstrap that growth, a team like Paxos can deposit and lend USDG at favorable rates and accelerate the USDG ecosystem. So there's a lot of different use cases we're excited about with teams launching different sponsored vaults, and we think it kind of expands the surface area greatly for how DePIN teams like Helium, for example, are able to finance hardware for new operators. And so these are some of these use cases we're very excited about. And so if you are a team on-chain or a fund looking to launch a credit facility or credit product, please get in touch. And if you're a borrower or lender looking for something better, visit us on Loopscale. Thank you.